Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you are watching the Muddy Waters Podcast. I am your host. The Muddy Waters Podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand, generally speaking, what's going on here in the state of Maine. Today, we're going to be a little different. We're going to focus more national with this podcast, but generally speaking, we exist to have a better understanding of what the heck is going on in our state. Unfortunately, mainstream media highlights more what's going on at a national level. Today, we have with us a representative from the Maine Libertarian Party, Dane Courtois. Is that how did I say it right?
Yeah,
Good.
Courtois.
I spelt your name wrong, apparently.
Where? On the link?
Yep.
Oh.
Oh, well, wow. Look at that. I make mistakes, in case you didn't know. Well, anyway, we'll move on from that. Can't adjust that on X anyway. Well, thank you for joining, Dane. And I think one of the things that, as I was kind of mentioning to you before we came on, that's interesting and why I thought it would be good to have you on is, in 2024, one of the biggest reasons that there are a variety of reasons we could walk through, like what had to happen for Donald Trump to win that election, but one of the biggest factors one of the big factors, I should say, in the 2024 election is that, like, partly because of Trump's stance on a number of issues, he was able to get a lot of libertarians to vote for him. And at least in my mind, I think it's issues like being anti-war, talking all the conversation about DOGE and cutting the deficit, and a number of other other issues where I think this isn't necessarily directed at the libertarians necessarily, but like the revelation of the Epstein files and a number of other things where I think I think that at the very least, people are not feeling as though Trump is kind of President Trump, I should say, is following through on his promises. And so I thought it would be fun to have a conversation and just to kind of talk about, like, what's happened so far. I don't think we have to be entirely negative, but like what's happened so far under the Trump administration, and talk a little bit about like what are some things that where maybe libertarians in particular might be feeling a little less love lately. So, yeah, I know that's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. I mean, it's like every other day there's 10 new things, right? So,
well,
it's crazy out there right now.
Well, in general, we live in a world where there's just so much news, and it's hard to keep up with everything that's going on. First of all. But on top of that, you've got, again, this current administration that is just like, some people are just so incredibly thankful because of like how much is getting done. That's what I keep hearing from a lot of people in the Republican movement that are very, very, very pro-Trump, and some of them that I think would be pro-Trump no matter what he did. But I think that there's just like there's so much going on that it's hard to keep up with. But yeah, so I just figured, I would be interested to hear, I know that, as we've talked about before, you're the only true libertarian, and that whole joke of, like, obviously there's a lot of variability within the Libertarian Party. But, as a libertarian, not just somebody who leans libertarian, like a lot of us in the Republican Party, but somebody who is actually within the Libertarian Party, I just wanted to hear some of, your take and kind of how you feel about, like, what's been going good under the Trump administration, and then also what are some of the things where you kind of feel left out to dry, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, when he first came into office, I was pretty pumped, and I think a lot of us libertarians that went for Trump versus our candidate felt the same way. A lot of that was the promises of DOGE, a lot of the things that Tulsi Gabbard was speaking about beforehand, like the groundswell of the coalition was very inspiring, I think, not just for a lot of MAGA and Republicans, but also for us libertarians as well. Not that he's libertarian at all, but there were a lot of things that he was talking about and campaigning on that we cared a lot about. First and foremost was the freeing of Ross Ulbricht. Then we all are very concerned with government transparency as much as we can have it. So the RFK, JFK, MLK releasing of those files. And I guess a lot of us had a lot of hope coming into this, and I think I can speak for myself. I was feeling like I was on not cloud nine, but I was feeling good and optimistic about where we were going, because there was a lot of rhetoric of stuff that like we would agree with. I definitely agreed with closing the border, which is an unorthodox libertarian view, or a kind of a 50-50 libertarian view. So yeah, I mean, but that high kind of ran out fairly quickly. It was probably mid-March where a lot of us started being like, okay, because Doge had all these promises, and then that got cut off at the knees, and the Epstein files were promised to us, and that first phase came out, right? We had all the binders go out to all the influencers with more to come. And obviously we've seen recently where that's gone, and we can touch on that later. But not feeling so inspired and happy and pleased about it now.
Yeah. So one of the questions, and we'll jump into some of these specific issues, but one of the questions that, like, you one of the things you mentioned so far is like Ross Ulbricht. Did he get freed?
He did. Yeah. It took him. So Trump had promised us at the campaign, at our convention, that he would free Ross day one. It was, I think, something like 36 hours after he actually was sworn in that Ross was walking the tarmac.
That's pretty quick.
It's fine by me, but I mean,
12 hours too late.
You're right. Whatever.
Yeah. So like, obviously, the early, I mean, Doge was interesting. I never really, even though they had like the transparency where they were explaining everything that they were doing, first of all, I never went to that website. Far too much going on. But it also seemed like often there were reports that this is what they uncovered, and then later on, it turns out that the information that was presented wasn't 100% accurate. So, like, for instance, right, like one of the ones where it's like, we're sending all these syringes, not syringes, it wasn't syringes, it was condoms to Gaza, right? This was the term, and it turned out later on that we discovered that Gaza was a city in another nation. This wasn't like Gaza within Israel, Gaza or Palestine or whatever. This was a different, I can't remember exactly where it was, but like some of the information wasn't always like upon further review, it didn't end up adding up. But ultimately, I think generally speaking, I was happy with some of what happened with Doge. Again, I don't go into like national politics a lot on here, but so this is probably going to be the first time people who are paying attention to this hear some of these thoughts. But like, I remember when Doge, like the idea was initially like an Elon Musk thing, that when Trump did the spaces, and you had Elon and Trump on there, and he came up with the idea, and then eventually, obviously, when Trump won, there was Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk that were going to be working together on Doge, and then there was shortly after the H-1B visa scenario, there was the falling out that seemed to happen. Like, what was interesting is, on a variety of levels, like, who knows what the heck was happening behind closed doors, but you had Vivek, who was on the same side of the aisle on that issue as Elon, but he attacked, so to speak, Saved by the Bell, and that got him in trouble. I think that was one of the biggest things that people took offense at, is he used characters from Saved by the Bell to explain some of the problems in American culture and why we need to bring in people from other countries to work some of these jobs. But whereas Elon was just fighting with people and like, was arguing with anybody who would argue with him about it on X. But I don't think it was directly related to that, but it was just interesting that happened. Whereas Vivek said that people didn't really like it, and he just went quiet, and he didn't really continue to communicate. There wasn't a lot that came out from him for quite a while until it turned out that he was going to be stepping down and being removed from Doge. And I was curious about what was going on, and a friend of mine, we discovered this article where somebody was kind of explaining kind of the difference of philosophy around how to do Doge with Vivek versus Elon. And this is before Trump was sworn in, anything like this, that I was looking into this. And, Vivek's response was going to be looking at using the legal system and this is my understanding. Again, I don't pretend to be an expert. Go out, do your own research, people. But Vivek was looking to utilize the legal system to say, okay, what government agencies were enacted at the command of Congress and which ones were not, or which ones had a congressional mandate at one point, but then it expired and they still exist. And he was planning to use the legal system to basically cut spending that way. That was kind of his approach. Whereas Elon's approach was the data. How do we use technology to research and figure out where we're spending money that we shouldn't be spending money? Now, my response is, can we do both, please? Can we do both? Yeah, right. Like whatever we have to do to cut unnecessary spending, waste, fraud, and abuse. But that, that's kind of the two different philosophies. And obviously the Elon Musk philosophy won out, and whether it was related to what happened, the H-1B visa issue, I don't think so, but like whatever it was, that won out. Vivek disappears, and this is what we have. And I almost feel like when you look at the long term, I feel like Vivek's approach might have been the better approach. Sorry, Elon, not that you're going to watch this anyway, but that was, to me, again, I think I also heard these rumors, because some people are trying to ask the question whether or not like Elon and Trump really fell out, or whether this is like 7D chess. Like anytime anything doesn't look good for Trump, the people who are just like so absolutely 100% in love with Trump, he's the fourth member of the Trinity, he's the second coming of Jesus, whichever direction you want. They will always, anytime anything's like questionable, they're like, this is like 5D chess or 7D chess or something along those lines. And so they are kind of suggesting that Elon is just playing this game, and that ultimately it's going to work out and it's all part of the plan, which I don't buy. I hear that there were some incidents where Elon was shoving people in response to some frustration over some issues. And so I think he is legitimately frustrated, and I think it was because people were giving him a hard time about, like, you said you were going to cut $1 trillion by Doge. Where is it? Because that was kind of the initial plan, So anyway, I just said a whole bunch of crap. So before we jump on to, but I don't know if those are issues that you were following, or what your thoughts were.
Somewhat. I mean, I was really pumped about Doge, because to me that was that was the Afuera of Malay, kind of what that kind of same spirit. I think Elon kind of mimicked Javier Malay's kind of effect on that, which is working great down in Argentina. And one tends to wonder, what would have happened if we kind of just, cut out every bit of fat and gotten right down to the root of, like, let's just get to subsistence level of everything, and let's cut away the fat. I mean, we have a Pentagon that's failed the last 5 of its audits, right? We have a budget there's so much waste, fraud, and abuse, and I kind of hate using those like buzzwordy catchphrases, but that's what's happening, right? I mean, it's all of those things all at once, whether it be financing NGOs that then get cycled and siphoned through to get to political parties, or whether it's for, Raytheon and Boeing, or whether it's for this, you can name all kinds of things. So who knows? So I was inspired and very excited, as many other libertarians were, about Doge, because it kind of, for the first time, there was someone who had the president's ear that was kind of talking like a Ron Paul or a Milton Friedman, or like a libertarian economist, or like someone who had some more Austrian or Chicagoan school economic education versus the Keynesian MMT thing that we've been living under, which is
print.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. No, and that that was an interesting thing that I was always curious how things were going to play out. Like I definitely, one of the things that is, I think people are appropriately critical of the Republican Party. Now, I still think the Republican Party is a better option. I think Trump, I think as we go through a lot of these critiques that I think you guys have, and I think I agree with a lot of them, maybe not 100%, and I have some other theories maybe that come around as to like maybe what's going on, but wow, did I just lose it? I lost my mind there.
One thing I will say that Doge was very successful in is moving the Overton window for the American people. It showed the American people a lot of shit that they never would have gone and looked up there for themselves.
Yeah.
And specifically, definitely. I think of USAID, which I think if you can point out one success about Doge, it's that. I mean, what did they cut for funding? Negligible, if anything. And honestly, the big beautiful bill negated and times that potential reduction in money spending and just blew that out of the water, right? But I mean, I think bringing USAID to the attention of the people, and a lot of the work that like Mike Benz has gone on Rogan about it, and like
he's been great. No, and I think what I was trying to get at is like the Republicans, when they're talking about, like when they're running for office, we're always talking about cutting the deficit, and then when we get in office, then what happens, right? Like this is the constant critique, and I think it's an appropriate critique that comes from the Democrats, right? Is that we talk a lot about cutting the deficit, and yet every time we're in office, we just spend a different way, right? Like the Democrats spend on all these social programs, giving money to other countries, blah blah blah. The Republicans, on the other hand, spend on national defense is like one of the biggest critiques, or other similar ideas. And like right now, I'm actually really annoyed with I actually, one of my favorite senators is Josh Hawley. I just like the way that he goes after like certain things, like when he does those senatorial, like when they bring people in to kind of grill them. I think he does a great job on a lot of issues, and I think it's fun to watch, although it is probably political grandstanding. And anyway, but when it comes to like this issue, the issue of what to do with increased revenues, for instance, I don't think the answer, Josh Hawley, when we have a $2 trillion a year deficit, is to give money back to the American people, considering the fact that we're continuing to go into debt, right? Like it's this really ridiculous idea that just use that money and put it toward the national debt. Like, let's see what we can do to reduce this $2 trillion a year deficit. Because for me, when I look at what's going on worldwide, I think that the not worldwide, but it does impact the world. That America cannot sustain this level of spending. I worked in banking for about 15 years and worked with individuals to try to help them figure out what to do with their budgets. Like deal with their debt, deal with their assets. We're a country that, like, if I was sitting down with them, I would tell them to file bankruptcy.
Right. Oh,
right. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I would just be like, you can't afford.
Years ago.
Well, exactly. I mean,
when we were only like 7 trillion in debt.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the crazy thing, that instead we have people that are like, oh, well, yeah, we're still going $2 trillion a year into debt, but we made a little extra money over here. We didn't know we were going to make, so let's continue to go $2 trillion a year into debt and give that to people so that they like us. And it's like, not interesting. Oh, that's you have one of the Thomas Massey debt clocks. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah. So anyway, I just think that whole thing is a little silly. So obviously Doge didn't do as much as we would have liked. I think.
I mean,
I'm in agreement
they didn't do anything other than they broadened people's perspective on what's actually occurring.
Yeah. And shut down USAID and really gave a platform for Mike Benz to educate the world about what's been going on with USAID, that it essentially has been an arm of the CIA to be able to do things that the CIA couldn't do because of the Espionage Act or something along those lines, which is fascinating. So anyway, let's move on to like some of the other issues. Let's talk about the one. Actually, let's just talk about Thomas Massey, right?
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things in my we'll call it my career on X is that leading up to, before Trump was sworn in, leading up to him being, I think I mentioned this on a podcast yesterday, but leading up to him being on to Trump getting elected, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, they were having to reelect him essentially, and in that conversation, basically Massey was like one of the holdouts that was basically like, I'm not gonna vote for him, and basically he just was getting attacked everywhere in social media, and I was annoyed for a couple of reasons. Not because I'm libertarian minded in a lot of ways, but I'm not a libertarian, right? But what I believe in is
small L libertarian.
Yeah. What I believe in is our Constitution. I think our Constitution is actually pretty important, and I believe this thing called separation of powers and the ability of these different departments to be able to hold people accountable. And I think it's really important. We don't have a society where every 4 years we elect a new king. We have a society where we elect a president, and that president has reins and has to act within those reins. I don't care if I agree with the guy or disagree with the guy, or girl, whoever ends up getting elected. But the reality is there's a process that we have that is set up on purpose, and like they were going after him for saying we need somebody other than Mike Johnson, who proved, after it was really excited that he was elected, he proved to be like a spineless guy who, jellyfish, I don't know, whatever you want to call him, who would just do whatever whoever was in power pushed him to do. He would just bend to that. And Massey's like, we don't need this. We need a Speaker of the House that has a spine, because Trump's not perfect. Even if I agree, generally speaking, by the way, I'm a fan of most of his agenda, not all of it, but most of it. But I don't think that the response is that we just need to back him in everything, and that everybody else just needs to get in line with Trump's agenda. And this is the biggest part of the issue for me, because he won. If you think that we need to get behind his agenda, argue the merits.
Yeah, it should be easy.
Right? Don't say, well, he won a mandate, so we have to do what he wants to do. No, argue the merits. Why do you think Speaker Mike Johnson, for instance, is the right fit to be the speaker? If you can't make that argument and your only answer is that's who Trump wants.
I mean, was Johnson a contrarian in Congress, or was he well liked and quite popular amongst his peers?
It's a really great question. I didn't even know who he was until it was announced that he was going to run as speaker, and he was like the 27th person presented, because they went through that whole process. But
yeah, I was somewhat familiar with him in based on his different committee appointments. I had seen him do his thing over the years. And I didn't have a positive impression, but I didn't have a negative one either.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Like he came in and just wet noodled almost immediately.
Yeah. It was really interesting to me, because I think after, again, I'm relatively newer to paying attention to politics. There are people that, I have a friend who knows national politics so much better than me, and would be able to, maybe he'll join the comments and argue with me, argue with us. It would be great. But argue, like, he has a better sense of what's going on, who's trustworthy. He really heavily focuses on national politics, where I focus broadly on political like ideas, not necessarily all the players at all the different levels at a national level. And then I'm trying to do the best that I can to understand what's going on here in the state of Maine. That's really where I've dove into over the course of the last 3 years. And so I kind of defer to him a little bit, but yeah, so I didn't really know much about Mike Johnson. I didn't know much about like this whole process where we basically have voted no confidence in Kevin McCarthy, and now we've got to find somebody else, and then it ends up being with Mike Johnson. And so I was hopeful that he would be better, than Kevin McCarthy, but it just turned out that he really wasn't. And it's one of those things that like makes you wonder. And I don't know what your thoughts are on this. I mean, do they, and whoever they are, CIA, deep state, whatever you want to call it, have a ton of information, or do they threaten people's families? Because a lot of times it seems like as soon as somebody gets into a seat like that, all of a sudden all of the ideals that they had before they got into that position dissipate, and they just do what they're told. Some of the things that Dan Bongino has said recently, we'll get into that a bit later. It is really fascinating.
I was just gonna say, like, that talk about, like, we don't really know what kind of tools that are the intelligence agent or community is utilizing, but we do all can point to instances in our very recent past and throughout history or whatnot of like people that say one thing, they campaign like Ron Paul, but then they govern like John McCain, and like they just completely flip, and it's status quo. Oh well, I never said that, or like there seems to be a constant theme of that amongst a lot of the people that then get into power. I mean, and the most recent one that I just immediately comes to mind is Dan Bongino, when he and Cash were doing, I don't remember who they were talking to, but they did that dual interview and talking about Epstein, and just the look on Dan's face when he said that he killed himself, right? When he's talking about Epstein and there's no there, like just the look of terror on his face, to me, was very alarming. I don't know if you picked up on that or if it's just one little weird thing that I noticed, but like a lot of people are like, he looked like he has a deer in headlights. And this is a, former police officer, former Secret Service guy who, was one of the top conservative voices online, and then, gets appointed, and then like 6 weeks later he killed himself, and it was just like, I'm not buying that. Are you?
No, not for a second. Do you think the answer is aliens?
No, I don't. I do think that they exist. I'm fairly confident that they've been here. That's just my own belief. I don't know. But I don't think they've been here recently. Honestly, I think they've been here a very, very, very long time ago. And but that's a bit of a dog leg.
No, it 100% was just because there are some crazy conspiracy theories out there, and lizard people, and not to say that aliens existing is a conspiracy theory. I think I don't think there's enough direct evidence, we'll say, but I think that there are some interesting things, but more just as a what in the world is going on when somebody like Bongino, who is just such a stark transparency guy, and not only has he come out and said, like, he made that comment, and I actually didn't watch the video. I heard that he said it, and I heard people quote it, but I didn't watch the video. But where, since then he made this comment that he'll never be the same, like that he's like, I can't, something like that, as a result of his time there, and just like how all this has been handled. And I just think that's really, really fascinating. So you have to wonder, like, is he not telling us maybe the truth because he's afraid for his life? right?
I think that has something to do with it. I also think that he was shown something that you took a little bit of a different interpretation than I initially did. I think he's learned something through this whole Epstein thing that has rocked him to his very soul, and he is stuck where he is because of other, potential threats to him or his family, or I don't know. Like, it smells to high heaven. The whole situation surrounding him. I mean, like, and also, what has he done I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I think the FBI would be investigating Butler, right? We just came after the year anniversary of that, and Bongino, right after that occurred, was the biggest voice in that conversation because he's former Secret Service, right? And I mean, he's second in charge at FBI. You would think he'd have some leverage of, like, maybe we should investigate this, like we've been preaching needs to happen for, up until his nomination or whenever he was tapped on, So that's alarming too. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't just lose a passion. I don't just overnight, like, nah, I'm not interested in that anymore. You know what I mean? And that seems to have happened.
Well, yeah, no, it's interesting because, like, so there's a lot of factors there, right? Like, and that I think need to be considered. But like, let's talk locally, right? Like, here in the state of Maine, I've heard these rumors, right, that once you get elected, you go in, you sit down with party leadership, and party leadership tells you basically what you're going to do. And if you don't essentially, by and large, obey their rules, not necessarily vote exactly with them in every way, not quite like it seems like it is with the Democrats, but largely, then they will primary you and you have no hope. Right. And so, like, don't, so, like, and that's here in the state. Like, I can only imagine what's going on at a national, at a federal level.
Exact thing, just at scale.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so, and also with people who, like, I think in the state of Maine, it's a lot more challenging to maybe orchestrate an assassination. Right. Whereas at a national level, it's a bit more, I think, easier for people to sneak into dark corners and especially in a place like DC that's full of crime, and we know people who have literally been killed there. Those a number of people who have been murdered, and I think there was a situation that Tucker Carlson brought up on one of his podcasts recently about this well-known situation. He didn't go into detail, but he referenced it. So, I think there's a lot. There are some some dangerous people that, like, when it comes to national politics, are much more likely to do some nefarious things. And even Elon Musk, we'll bring him back up. When he was on Rogan after starting with Doge, he made this comment that I can't tell you everything because I don't think I would. I think I'd be killed, right? And so that's like, Elon is espousing that, like, it's dark, and so it's really interesting. So there's that element, but I also think, like, you make the comment, like, I don't just lose my passion. I don't. But there are things that can really seriously bog me down. You know what I mean? Like, let's say I
threatened.
Well, no, not. I mean, that for sure. But I just mean, like, so I'm thinking about the task that Bongino and Kash Patel have, and I'm not necessarily terribly trusting of Kash Patel. I'm more trusting of the three people involved in the Epstein saga, we'll say, in national politics. I think Bongino is the one that I have some level of trust for, right? Kash Patel, my source will say, has suggested that they thought he was part of the problem under the Trump administration. One of the concerns with the first Trump administration, right, is that he hired a lot of people. He brought in a lot of people he was advised to do so by people who had deep state connections. And essentially the reason he wasn't as effective in his first cycle was that, he had the wrong people, and a bunch of deep state operatives were part of his team. And so there were some that suggested that Kash Patel is one of those people. Right. And when did
Trump won?
I think he was
he was at the Pentagon or something.
He was in intelligence at some level. I know that because he talked about hunting down not Al Qaeda but ISIS. But he was in the administration. I'll find it in just a second. And anyway, there was questions about whether or not he actually was deep state or not. Had those connections in the first administration. So anyway, he let me just see here real quick. Oh, it's taking a bit, but and then when Pam Bondi was somebody who there were some concerns around her in the same way. So apparently, so he was on the House Intelligence Committee and then National Security Council, and then the acting deputy director of the National Director of National Intelligence was what he did for a little bit. So he was in a number of roles within intelligence, essentially. And so anyway, so there were some concerns that he was compromised at the very least, and then there were some concerns I heard that Bondi might also be compromised. And so Bongino was the one that I had the most faith in out of those three. But
I mean, a lot of stuff in that whole thing is so messed up. It's so suspicious. The whole story, there's so many different details. I mean, just one thing I'm just thinking of now is about John Ratcliffe, right? He was DNI at the time.
Okay.
And oh wait, actually, I'm thinking about the latest bombshell about Obama. Sorry. But still, I mean, like he was. Well,
I think he was the director of national intelligence under Trump, I believe.
Trump won, yeah. But the reason why I was bringing that up was because of the release of the Obama stuff. Not really had anything to do with the Epstein stuff. But I mean, one thing is that Pam Bondi was actually the AG on the first case that Epstein was tried under, and got a softball plea deal on, which is worth noting. And now she's AG now.
So she should have known a lot of information in the past. She shouldn't have needed to have it revealed to her. Wow. Yeah.
I mean, it would stand to reason that the feds would have more information, especially more broadly, right? Because they would have had stuff from New York. And it wouldn't have just been like whatever was in Key West or wherever his island there is. Or no, he had a property in Orlando, right? Or Miami.
I think so, yeah.
Came down, yeah. But some very weird things, man. Like, I mean, the fact that Epstein was hired by Bill Barr's father at the Dalton School, that's really odd.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the whole Epstein thing is very fascinating, and I'm very curious to see what plays out, because they are releasing some information. Apparently, they have asked for information related to the grand jury investigation or whatever to be released. I think Trump's administration has suggested that. I think the piece that is not coming out is like the list, and there are a variety of reasons.
Is there there's not actually a list. Someone has to compile a list. It's not like they had a black book of these are all the people that we've sold, relations, any of that. That's not what exists, right? And I hope most people understand that now.
Right. And I think that's the piece where everybody was like, there's a list. He's got a client list that he had a notebook and he kept track of them all in. And I think that's the piece that there isn't a client list. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's not more information that needs to come out. Right. Yeah. There's not something that we can compile there. Obviously, there's a lot of information that we know about people from the flight logs. We know. And that's one of the things that like really irritates me too, is like every time they bring up Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. So like his name is mentioned in the Epstein files. It's like, yeah, we know from stuff that they've already released, but I don't. Who knows? I don't.
What is it? All squares are rectangles. Not all rectangles are squares, right? Just because someone's name appears in these lists of files does not mean that they were raping children.
Right.
It doesn't even mean that they were in the same room. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was very clearly a money laundering or money finance guy who looks like was running a blackmail ring for some sort of intelligence, whether it was Mossad or the CIA or both or others.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think I think it was Mike Benz. Mike Benz, actually, he's coming up a lot in this conversation, but he has a good piece that he was on with Jesse. I can't remember the last name, but Jesse something. Two women's names. The last name sounds like a woman's name too. Jesse can be a man's or a woman's. Anyway, but I can't remember the name. But Mike Benz with Jesse something. And he has like a 30-minute clip where he kind of goes through the story arc of Epstein, how he kind of came to be where he was. He actually suggests that it's not that Epstein was running a ring, he was trying to get information on people to be able to blackmail them, but instead that it was providing people access to powerful people, kind of thing. That he was more of a power broker, which is really interesting. It doesn't kind of explain all of the children stuff and whatnot, but it is an interesting perspective, an idea. But it is, the whole Epstein thing is really interesting, and the fact that information's not coming out about that, I'm very disappointed in. And what about the JFK stuff? So information came out about that, but was it anything new? It was just old rehashed stuff, all the same stuff.
There was nothing new at all.
Yeah,
I mean, well, there was nothing new. However, one thing that kind of percolated out of that small bit of release that we did get on that was that it kind of put front and center the Israel involvement as well. But that was kind of known back then, and it's not really known of, like, it's not pointing a finger. It's just there's these people. This government was involved as well somehow.
Okay, but not really directly, clearly how.
Right. It was more of just like, but again, like, that's been a hot topic for a bunch of different reasons in the past year and a half or so. So, yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. Anyway, it's so that's a bit disappointing, but like, okay, so like when I want to go back to Thomas Massie, because part of the reason I was bringing him up was actually because Thomas, when all that was happening with Speaker Mike Johnson, I was like defending Massie on a bunch of things in Twitter, and then he followed me, and I was like, "Ooh, I have arrived. I'm gonna follow."
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the club. That was a very happy day for me too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really like, he's a very principled person. Some people think he's a grandstander, but I'm gonna hope that he's principled, and I think that like when it comes to things like the One Big Beautiful Bill, this is another example. Like, how do we change the culture of where we pass all these omnibus bills if some people don't stand up and say, hey, I'm not going to vote for it unless you make it make more sense, right? Like, how do we attach the deficit unless we have people who are going to say, hey, I'm not voting for a bill that increases the deficit
at all, ever, for any reason. Right. Yeah. And you're right, because like I think that's one of the major issues with just politics in general, is that it's always it is and always has been and always will be a game of distraction to facilitate consent or like at least a facade of authority, and maintain your facade of authority. That's what politics are always going to be, and we're seeing that play out. And people like Thomas Massie and Rand Paul to a degree as well, are people that are drawing attention to really important issues that will break this country, specifically the debt, in the next decade. I would predict, if we don't start really addressing it and taking stuff seriously. We can't continue to kick the can on a lot of these issues.
Well, and more to the point, like, not just the economic problems that'll come to America. If we actually default on our debt and we can't pay our bills, this doesn't just affect America, right? This leads to economic collapse worldwide, and likely a world war if we're not already in one at the time, right? Like, who knows what's going to happen before our debt issues kind of come to the surface, but from a world standpoint, like, when you have, I mean, this is there is a little bit more turmoil now than there was 2 years ago, in terms of wars and conflicts and stuff like that. But like what really leads to like conflicts is a limitation of resources, and due to the way in which America has been operating, we've been sending a lot of money and doing a lot of things that have helped a lot of other countries. But if the spigot gets turned off here, like that's going to cause a lot of problems everywhere else too. So like that's why like the deficit is actually it is, and I think this is something Elon Musk has said, an existential crisis for America. And so that's where like it is really important. So yeah, that we address that, and that's why I'm appreciative of people like Thomas Massey. I imagine you are too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we also like we talked a little bit about wow, geez. So let's talk about the one big beautiful bill. Actually, like what are your thoughts on that? I think it's more complicated than just the deficit piece, but yeah, generally speaking.
So I mean, right off the bat, it's the $5 trillion immediately in debt, added to the deficit rather. That just can't happen, and was spat in the face of all of what Doge was trying to do, spat in the face of a lot of the campaign rhetoric that Trump had on the trail, and it's just like, okay, new boss, same like the old, right? Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, you're fine. Yeah. So what's been frustrating for me is like I do think that there's potentially an argument. So there's a couple of things, right? Like I have a couple of brothers that are much more in the libertarian. One is probably actually maybe a registered libertarian, and he well anyway they both are frustrated by this and are just like at this place where they're like meh, like they just want to throw up their arms a bit at the Trump administration for sure. And as I'm thinking about, I'm frustrated too, because like I don't like doing one thing and saying one thing and then doing another. But there's a question about like, okay, so when you look at what Trump has done, and there's a lot of positive things, right? We're not really highlighting those, but like, first of all, like within a week, like they found 80,000 of the children that were missing of the 250, and I'm sure more have been found since then. They've obviously closed the border, which is really awesome, to a degree where Trump thought he was successful in the border in his first administration, and he makes himself look like his first administration looked like a droopy-armed child over against what they've done to shut down the border this time. When you look at the number of people who are getting through, and so they've just done a really fantastic job there. But protecting boys and girls sports, like bringing Title IX back to what it should be. These are important things, like trying to stop transgender treatment of minors. That's one thing, not necessarily a libertarian thing, but a thing that like I know that from our previous conversation that you and I agree on. And there's a lot of things that he's done. The problem is, even with the Doge stuff, like you saw, they tried to codify that, right? They tried to codify that. They tried to include the Doge cuts into the bill, and it just couldn't get done. It couldn't get done. And so, when you look at a lot of what Trump has done, as much as, my friends, they're probably not watching anymore because we probably said too much negative about Trump. But if they do get to this point, one of the problems with what he has been able to do is it's all through executive order, right? None of it is lasting change, right? And so thinking about this, I'm asking the question and I'm saying, okay, so maybe there is a bit more to the story. Maybe Trump has a play that says, he knows. There's two things that I'm going to suggest, and I want to hear what you have to say about them. One is maybe he knows this, right? And he's saying, okay, so in order for me to actually do anything, he wants to be on Mount Rushmore, right? Some people think he should be there already. But anyway, but if he wants to accomplish that, he has to win. The Republicans have to take more of a majority in the House and the Senate in order to be able to get meaningful policy passed. Because with the limited majority they have in the House and the limited majority, especially considering that there are a couple of the people that technically are Republicans that a lot of people are questioning whether or not they're actually really Republicans. You've got the rhinos, you've got Lindsey Graham, you've got Mitch McConnell. I think Susan Collins represents herself as who she is. But she gets a lot more criticism. She's not a Republican in the conservative. It doesn't align with my viewpoints and values directly in every way. But she at least appropriately represents herself. I don't think I'd call her a rhino per se. But I think that she has values that are different than mine, and she's consistent with those. But Lisa Murkowski is somebody who I wouldn't say that about. So you have a number of people that are just like not necessarily reliable to vote for the right things, is what I would say, or that they would vote in favor of these things because they have too many tentacles in them from the deep state. And there are a couple others on the Republican side that could be noted too, but I'll just mention those ones for now. But the point is, there's not enough of a majority to actually really what you need is a conservative majority, not a Republican majority. And we don't actually have a conservative majority fiscally in reality. And so in order to be able to pass any meaningful bills and things like, because there's no way that Trump doesn't know that executive orders don't continue after he's gone, right? And I don't think, even though he's made some comments, because this is what Trump does.
When you say that, do you mean they don't continue because the next guy just nixes all of them?
Right, exactly. I mean, obviously, if another Republican gets elected, they could. Well, like his tariffs that he put on China in his first administration, the Democrats never removed those. But a lot of the things that the conservatives are really excited about, the fact that he's done, most of those I think would be rescinded by any Democrat who comes into office. And so, like, in order to have like meaningful, real change, you have to pass stuff through the legislature. And I think maybe the theory on why he's doing what he's doing, and this is what I was telling my brother, is that he knows that we need to win in 2026. So he's doing some things that maybe don't bring us where we need to go in terms of the deficit in the long term, in order to be able to win a conservative majority so that he actually can make changes that will be beneficial in the long term. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, maybe that's what he's doing, but I mean, I think he's completely lost. I think he's gone from like Republicans being pretty comfortable for 26 to everyone biting their nails now, and he's done that over the Epstein stuff, and he's done that over the Iran bombing. Yeah, those two things I feel lost him. I mean, I saw a poll. I saw something, I think it was CNN yesterday. I don't know if it was from yesterday or if it was like something last week while I was on vacation. I was just catching up on media. But there was a poll about his just general support, and he was up like a month ago by like 8 points. And now he's down by 7, which means that's like a, what?
15-point swing.
Right, 15-point swing.
Yeah.
That's pretty big. Especially given the mandate that he had supposedly coming in, and for it to have changed that quickly as well. So, I mean, I hear you, but like at the same time, I'm sort of like shit or get off the pot. Like just go. Do what you can, and we'll stop. I mean, this is the push and pull of politics. Will something get taken out, or you could do what Massey suggests and do single subject bills, right?
Yeah.
As far as the big beautiful bill thing goes, I mean, like, the deficit sucked. I was really bummed about a lot of the 2A stuff. Like, it was before it hit the Senate, when it left the House, it was great 2A wise. It was fantastic. The Short Act was in there. I think the HERE Act or whatever that one was about the suppressors. Those were all in there, and then the Senate ended up stripping them down.
So
what? And then kind of like, yeah.
What were those two?
So the short act was to remove SBRs and SBSs from the. I don't know if it was from the NFA or if it was. It must have been like it just removing that altogether. And the HERE Act was the same thing, but it was for suppressors. And I believe that what ended up happening now that it's passed is both of those are in. However, they did it in a way that might end up being a win, but like they could have just been taken out with the Big Beautiful Bill, like immediately, unilaterally. But now they're still in, but there's zero tax on the NFA, which means that it's effectively now a registry. There was a ruling back on this that SCOTUS did back in the 80s that they ruled on the NFA, which is the National Firearms Act of 1934, I believe it was, which meant it put forth like a $200 tax stamp for things like SBRs, SBSs, so short-barreled rifles or shotguns, and fully automatic weapons and suppressors. Right? That's what that did. I mean, you got to ask the government for permission. You pay a $200 fine, or I guess fee. Yeah, please, government, can I have my rights, please? And then, so what this has done is this has taken that tax out. So this was ruled on by SCOTUS back in the 80s. I don't remember the case, not what the case name was, but they said that the NFA was constitutional because it fell under the Article 1 powers to the legislature that they have the ability to levy a tax, right? And because there was a tax involved, this registry of what I have and what I'm paying a tax stamp for wasn't considered a registry by SCOTUS. Now that money is $0, now this is a constitutional issue, because now you still have to register, but you don't have to pay anything. So you effectively now would have to register, those specific types of firearms and firearm accessories. But that's going to have to done through the courts and all this. So that could have been a good thing. It's not a horrible thing now, but
so it could have just been a done deal, and now it's basically going to have to go back to the Supreme Court, because the reason that they said that they could do it before was because there was a tax involved. Now this is stripping the tax away, therefore the whole reasoning that the Supreme Court said it was constitutional doesn't exist anymore. So it should get overturned. But how many years is it going to take for that to happen? Because that's how the Supreme Court system is going to work. So
Yep. Yeah. I don't know why I have this pulled up. Oh, I guess we're jumping around a little bit. But for anyone interested in the Epstein stuff in greater detail, Tucker Carlson just had Daryl Cooper on 2 weeks ago. So I highly suggest you go watch that. It's like almost 3 hours, but he does a fantastic job of just bullet pointing the whole history of everything. And there's not much for commentary. It's literally just all those details. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so you're talking about the one Big Beautiful Bill, the things that were pulled out. So the 2A stuff, that basically was kind of still good, but not as good.
Grand slam, right? Could have knocked it out of the park with 2A stuff, but it's more of like we're just grabbing a hot dog at the snack shack now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, so the other question that I had, so there's the one theory that maybe Trump is trying to, and I want to go back to this because I think that it's within the realm of possibility, and I think it's worth considering further. But so like, I understand that right now there's a lot of people over a couple of these things that are upset with Trump, but like, one of the things that we know, I talk about this a lot in Maine state politics, because this like boys and girls sports issue is a big issue. You're going to get everybody upset about it. They're going to talk about it. But the real question is, are they going to vote on it? Right? The question is, what actually motivates people to vote? And the thing that tends to motivate people the most to vote is how light or heavy their wallet or pocketbook feels. Right.
Yep.
And so that's where, like, even though people are upset now and the polls look the way that they do now, if because of this tax this tax cut, that we go into. And there were a lot of other good things in the tax cut. First of all, the tax bill, I should say, it eliminated, at least for 1 year. I wish it was for more than 1 year. Taxpayer funded abortions. It created work requirements for people that were on basically things similar to like Maine care, but the government funded things like that. That they're now creating work requirements. And it made sure that the tax cuts that have been put in place in 2016 are permanent, essentially. I think these are some good things, and so I think it's worth noting those two. But I also think, and I'm far from an expert in the bill, by the way. I'm sure you know more about it than I do. Those are just some fun talking points that I know about it. But the again, the theory is that, if this will be good in the short term. We like right now, we have to be thinking about both the short term and the long term, I think, but long term is actually very, very frightening. And so like, we got to figure out how we're going to tackle that deficit. Right. Yeah. And so when we look at what's happening with this, it is going to be good in the short term. It is going to lead to economic growth here in the United States of America, because of the reduction in taxes. I think that's undoubted. And is that going to put us in a position where economically things look really good in 2026, and therefore people are like, well, Trump did a great job, we want more of this, and we're going to vote for him. I think that's kind of the theory. And I think that regardless of how people feel now, I think that's probably going to end up being positive for us in the meantime. I mean, in 2026, but like that definitely remains to be seen. That's a theory, and we'll see what things look like in practice. But the other thing that I say, and I'll give you an opportunity to respond to this too, and this is one of my biggest frustrations with people being upset about Massey again about this, is that, again, a lot of your people who are supporters of Trump and Trump's agenda are just like, well, this is what Trump wants, so you need to get on the train or we're going to primary you. And again, like, can you just argue the merits, right? Because there is another theory, right, that suggests that, and this is one of the things that one of Trump's economic advisors was on. Somebody sent me a clip, and he was talking about something, essentially saying that reducing the tax will increase the economy to the point where we'll actually take in more money in taxes, right? This is the theory. And then when you combine that with the money that we're making off tariffs, which will be a fun topic to get into as well, that's going to help us cut the deficit. And yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't buy into the idea that the tariffs are going to have any meaningful change for the Joe Schmo American. I think tariffs are, manipulation of the free market. And if you really wanted to stimulate the economy and really wanted to pay down the debt, get rid of the income tax right off the bat. That'll give people more money to spend on whatever they want. I guess you could argue that tariffs are incentivizing people to buy American, but there's a lot of different products because we've exported a lot of our production overseas over the past 4 or 5 decades, whatever it's been, that you can't buy American. There isn't that. So there's kind of a double-edged sword there, and like it feels a little bit like putting the cart before the horse. Yeah, I'm not supportive of the tariffs at all. I think I lost the train of the first bit of that question.
No, that's right. So the question was, so there's two. I want to get back to tariffs, but we'll come back to that. So it was more a matter of like the suggestion. So like general economic theory, I think, is in even in terms of taxation, right? Is contrary to popular belief, there are cases where reducing the tax rate leads to economic growth and leads to higher amounts of revenues taken in by the government. An example of that, I believe, is Florida. Like somebody was talking about this, I think yesterday, that Florida reduced their tax rate and they're actually taking in more money in tax revenue than they were prior to. That it led to economic growth and therefore higher tax revenues, even though there's a lower tax rate. and that is the theory here, and that's going to lead to there being eventually a surplus, and we'll be able to tackle the national debt then. That's kind of the theory.
Right. I mean, and yeah, let's try it.
Let's hope it happens, right?
Right. I don't have any high hopes for that.
Well, it would be interesting if that's the argument. Then why did you need to include the potential to increase the deficit by $5 trillion if you thought that your tax cuts were going to reduce the deficit? Right. That would be a question that would need to be asked for sure. And just seems like a problem there. But getting at tariffs, like, it's interesting. So I actually think that, like, the emergence, the elimination of tariffs are primarily one of the major things anyway that led to the downfall of the American economy. And so I actually been saying this long before Trump ever became president. During the Obama administration, probably about halfway through the Obama administration, is where I kind of, because I'd paid attention to some things in school. I remember learning about NAFTA when I was in high school, and I followed some things that happened from, in the Clinton administration, then the Bush administration, and then Obama. And I think we have a trifecta of things that happened under 3 different administrations that made it, made 2 things happen under these administrations. One, it became so easy and so economically helpful, financially beneficial to major corporations to move their operations, as much of their operations as they could, overseas, where they had less expensive workforces and less regulations on employees and different things like that. So the combination of, like, that would be the combination of really Clinton and Bush, right? Clinton created the opportunity. Clinton in doing NAFTA to the world, basically, free trade. We're not going to charge tariffs. Now, people were still charging tariffs on the United States, interestingly enough, but we stopped charging tariffs on other nations. And so then our major corporations started to move a lot of their manufacturing outside the country. Then in come George W. Bush, and he put through some policy that gave huge tax breaks to major corporations, citing this thing that doesn't appear to work in reality, trickle-down economics. That, if we give these tax breaks to these big corporations, they're going to expand their operations, they're going to pay their employees more, they're going to invest locally, and that we're going to have economic growth. And major corporations had economic growth because they said, hey, we were already looking to move stuff overseas. Now that we got this extra money from the tax breaks, let's build some factories and build the infrastructure. And so that happened. And then in walked the Obama administration, and the Obama administration created, like, substantially, especially with Obamacare, the most substantial thing being Obamacare itself, created, or the Affordable Care Act as it's actually known, created a heightened regulation, making it much more challenging and expensive to maintain employees in the United States. And I think for some of the businesses who didn't want to move their operations overseas, but got to a place where it's like, we can't compete anymore, we have to, they move their operations overseas. So I think you have this trifecta of things that have happened. And so to me, like, how do you, like, the part of the question is, can we put the genie back in the bottle?
Yeah. How do you incentivize that? Yeah.
Right. And I don't think it's possible to do it without tariffs.
Yeah. I mean, and that is a good argument for tariffs, because it does disincentivize companies from exporting their factories and production and make their products here. It also inspires external manufacturers to build things here as well, which is good for job market and for, our general economy here. I know Toyota just, I think, promised like 600 million or billion. I don't remember which it was. Hopefully it's billion. They have a big facility coming in to, I want to say Ohio, but I could be wrong. So, I mean, stuff like that, and that is, that's a positive, I suppose, of the tariffs. However, the problem becomes tariffs aren't paid by the importing manufacturers. Tariffs are paid by you and me when we decide to buy that product over an American similar.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true that
And like what
we're the
the
ones,
only
and that's where
what's
the yeah, go for it.
well, I
Continue.
was just gonna say the only like disincentive that a foreign manufacturer would be is because of our tariffs against them. So like that, I suppose, is positive in the sense that it inspires growth here. But then again, like, it's six and half a dozen in my opinion. And when you're footing the bill, when the American people are footing the bill rather than just letting the market be, I have big problems with that.
Yeah. So it looks like Toyota is going to spend like 1.4 billion, is or
Okay.
something along those lines.
Right.
Maybe 8 billion. Anyway, there's a couple different things that I'm seeing here. So anyway, I hear what you're saying, but I actually feel like this is in the same vein as the other conversation that we had about the deficit. I actually think that this is a behemoth that if we don't address this, we are going to bankrupt our country. And the reason is, like, you can't have nation A spend $50 million more than they receive in forever, right? When like, let's say town A and town B. Town A is spending $50 million a year more than they're receiving in income buying stuff from town B than town B is buying from them. That means, like, at some point, like, town A is going to run out of money. Right now, because of the way that trade works and currencies and how that all that whole interweaves or whatever, that doesn't exactly happen, but that is part of what leads to the devaluation of the US dollar. And so over time, if we don't address this trade deficit, as much as like these quote unquote economists, I mean, I also, when people say, economists say that a trade deficit is good for the US economy, they're some of the stuff that they're citing, I think, is faulty, and it's focused on major corporations and not Main Street. Wall Street and Main Street are not the same thing. We need to be more concerned about Main Street. Um, so that's one of the things that I would say. But the other thing is, like, Bernie Sanders also had economists saying that, like, overtaxing the people was going to lead to economic growth. People who call themselves economists don't necessarily have to have economic theory that plays out in reality. So, like, a trade deficit over time is another incredible. That's why we've got two ticking time bombs. One is the trade deficit. The other is the national debt. And I think that both of those are things that need to be addressed. And I don't see another way to address it outside of trying to bring jobs back here. And yeah, I think it's going to drive up some of the costs, although we haven't seen substantial increases in costs as this is starting to implement, although it does take time for us to see those. So that will be something that'll come over the course of the next 6 to 9 months. And I think that's where we're going to begin to see price changes in a lot of things, outside of stuff that's directly imported, obviously, through certain vendors. Like, you can buy stuff online and it comes, you're going to see that immediately. But in general, it's going to take a bit more time to take effect. But in the long run, we have to bring manufacturing to some degree back to the United States, both, I think, from an economic standpoint and from a national security standpoint. National security might not be the right way to put it, but, like, when you look at, like, the pharmaceutical industry and how little of our like major necessities are actually developed in the United States, like, all of our drugs come from China, right? That's dangerous. That's not,
Yeah.
like, especially because of how much
We
we
saw that
rely on
during
those.
COVID. Like that, we saw that during COVID. That was we were not
Mm.
prepared for that at all. You know.
Yeah. Well, and like, I know that, like, some of the other theories are you could provide, like, government, like, I don't even know exactly what it was, but well, the government spending, right? So, like, basically, we'll give incentives to businesses to bring manufacturing over here, and you saw that with Biden's Infrastructure Act, where they're going to spend so much money on chip manufacturers that the government is going to spend to bring manufacturing of chips to the United States, and you didn't see a substantial impact. And I think those types of things, like the chip manufacturers, like, sure, you give me 500-600 billion now, and I'm going to pay all that in taxes over the course of this amount of time. So in the long run, I'm still losing money by doing this, right? But when you create, like, a more of a kind of penalty system, which is, and maybe combine that with also like a incentive, it really just positive and negative incentive, right? When you have both of those, you're more likely to get the result that you need. But like, what other solutions do we have to get more manufacturing here in the United States? Because like, again, economically, like that, if we don't address that, we're in trouble nationally, I think, long term.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. As far as what do we do, I don't know. I'm always gonna pull the chute and just deregulate everything you can. Make let the market figure itself out, because I mean the market is one of the most, in my opinion, beautiful products of just whether it be humanity or just social. Because I mean you see markets in animal communities as well, but like I think that it's kind of like water, right? The market's going to find the path of least resistance. It's going to get to the larger lake or whatnot. So I would always just knee jerk and say just deregulate and leave the market be and let the chips fall where they may. We got to this point by tinkering with things. Maybe we should stop tinkering so much.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the free market. It's interesting. I think I may have mentioned this already, but Representative, what's his name? Rafael Macias.
Okay.
Out of Topsom. He was on the podcast recently. He's a Democrat, and he is on the opposite end of the spectrum from you on that issue. Like he is like, I think he even mentioned that he was doing some advocating for the DSA when he was on the podcast. I went viral, by the way, but I didn't actually get credit for it because the Maine Wire shared it and then Libs of TikTok shared it, and so it went to it's on one of the clips was from that Maine Wire actually made the clip, so they get all the credit for getting it viral. But like Libs of TikTok picked it up because this guy was saying some crazy stuff. But anyway, had him on the podcast, and he is talking about more and more regulation for businesses. It's all the Marxist stuff. Like we got to focus on the laborer, the worker, right?
What's the incentive to the business owner? Why would I even want to do business here then?
Right. And so like, where would business come from? Who's going to invest? Who's going to develop? Who's going to do that? Because like, this is the thing that people don't understand is how challenging it is to start a business and run a business. And why would you go through that unless there's some sort of an incentive, as you say? But the other thing is like this idea of regulation. Like one of the things that I had a conversation with a fellow Republican a while back on this issue, and I basically I don't think I've really fully changed from this, but he did make me think a lot about it. Is like, I'm okay primarily with regulation of businesses above a certain size, partly because I think there are other ways to address this, but my biggest concern is like, we'll just say businesses like Amazon, Apple, Meta, Google and Chase as being the kind of the biggest bank and powerhouse there, and Microsoft, Nvidia. These companies, because of their size, they have a lot of potential that if they go bad, to do danger and substantial damage to our society. So if you want to have, I personally believe, if you want to have, at the moment, I can be persuaded potentially. I have an open mind. I try anyway. If you want to regulate like really big companies like that, I'm okay with that, right? Because I feel like they're a danger to society and they're harming society to some degree as it is. I think those organizations are. But I think that the problem that we have is that we regulate small businesses and make it so that they can't compete. Like a lot of the regulation that we put in place is actually regulation that favors. It's not written that way. It's like, oh, we need to address this to make sure this, and it's like, but who does this benefit? Okay, well, they're probably behind it, right? And who it benefits is the major corporations, those really big companies. But the theory that this other friend of mine had was basically like, if you just completely deregulate, then the free market will fix the inequities of the power that these companies have. I don't know that I buy that, but I'm open to the possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, like your concern about or your want to regulate large companies because of the danger that they have to society. I don't know if you noticed, I was grinning through that a little bit. You're describing a government, right? You're describing
a government a government is big and is a danger to society.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want smaller government. So there's that. Yeah.
Right. Not necessarily consented to. At least in the private sector, we have consent usually on if we're going to consume or purchase a product or service, right?
Well, yeah. So yes. We
have a choice with all of that for the most part. There are some areas
do
we? Where we don't.
Yeah, but do we? Right.
So some areas where we don't have consent, like we don't have consent who we get our power from. We don't have consent on, here in Maine, but we have consent on almost every other choice we make, product we consume, use, whatever it might be, where we don't have consent over how we're governed. So that's why I was kind of like grinning at that. Is that,
Well,
corporations are dangerous, but
the question I would have is, what about like phones and things along those lines? Do we like, when you look at phones, you basically, now technically, yes, there are other options outside of iPhone or
several.
But there's the operating systems, right? You've got iPhone, and then you've got the the Android operating system, and then when it comes to computers, you have Mac and PC. And so, like, do we really have options? And part of my concern, in areas where I would love to see nationally some regulation, unless I can be convinced otherwise, but is that these companies have, at this point, now if you turn back the clock and you don't have a lot of the regulation that we now have, and a lot of the things that have led to the seismic growth of these companies controlling the market, the market share, then maybe we don't even have to ask this question. I mean, regulation got us here. Probably regulation doesn't get us out of here. But the problem is that, like, Apple and Google and Microsoft, basically anytime anybody has any great idea and starts something up that could potentially hurt their market share, they just buy them. One of them buys them. And that, like, their current behemoth status make it so that it's virtually impossible to challenge them and really seriously gain market share in those particular areas. And that's where, like, I'm like a free market with a seatbelt. That's kind of tends to be my attitude. Like, I do think there are potential concerns there.
All of those companies that get bought up by the large companies, they all chose to do that, right? They all chose to sell.
There are complications involved in answering that question. Sure, they did. Now, the question is, do they regret that decision later on down the road? Did they do it because they got to a point where their access to capital and their ability to grow, they knew they'd kind of hit the peak and they weren't going to really be able to grow any further without further investment, and that investment was being hindered by the power brokers that are behind these major corporations, these major companies, right? Like, so I think it's a bit more complicated than simply, did they have the choice? Did they make their own decision? Sure, like, so that's where, like, I do believe in, like, anti-trade, I guess, antitrust laws. I think monopoly policies and things along those lines, I think they need to be revamped and revised. But I hate to say things like I agree with Pocahontas, but on this issue, she was saying that we need to deal with.
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah. I was so annoyed when she was running for president that she brought these things, like wanting to talk about these specific companies, because I was like, I don't want to have something in common with Elizabeth Warren. That just because I think I disagree with her on just about everything else. And so, anyway, Nuance is fun, but I'm open. I'd love to have somebody convince me otherwise. But that's kind of my concern with with especially with where we're currently at with these companies, where they just have the ability to easily buy up anybody who might have the potential to be able to challenge them. And like I'm okay. Like, first of all, like I'm somebody who says this, but I love Apple products. So I don't know that I would choose something something else, because I think they do just such a fantastic job. But I feel like the reason that we don't have more really high quality options, because in the Android market you basically have, in my opinion, you, even though you have more options, you really have like you primarily, most people are choosing between either Apple and Samsung.
And you're usually limited by like OS because of that.
Yep.
But I mean, I just kind of had this thought, like I sort of would point my finger at intellectual property, copyright law, at that should be severely reduced. Because if that were, rather than
interesting, that's a really great approach.
IP, I mean, there are different schools in the libertarian world about IP. I tend to be on the more traditional side of of that argument. There are many libertarians that think IP are complete, like all IP laws should be abolished. That like the your product should be able to compete against in the market, and you should be able to turn a profit because you are sourcing the right materials, and you're creating a superior product. So and I think copyright and trademark laws and stuff like that can get in the way, especially given how long a lot of those durations go. With patents, even all of this stuff is tied together. If those time frames were severely reduced, like you file a patent, you have a product launch, you got 5 years on that patent, and before it's up there for everyone to compete against, and then maybe generate something even better off of yours, and that then feeds everything. That means money or what's the graph go up, right? I mean, we all get more prosperous that way, because that would leach into literally every single market for every single thing.
That's a great idea, I think, actually, because I that may be a better way to approach it, because I do think that, like, that's especially the way that they've done trademark stuff, and especially if it's like, well, if this thing is considered to be central to your brand, right, okay, like that's where Disney was able to keep the original, like, Mickey Mouse for, like, I don't know, 125 years instead of like what they should have been able. I don't. It was a large number. It was pretty crazy.
I think it's 100 years.
I think they extended it somehow, but I think you're right. Either way, I think it was supposed to be. I think it's supposed to be 50, and then they were able to extend it. And anyway, it's a little bit absurd. It's like, at that point, what's the difference between just having it be permanent, right? Because it doesn't really do you much good. So you can't really compete, and if you can't use it for another 50 years, right? That's ridiculous. It's something shorter, I think, makes a lot more sense. And if you do a good job building your business, you build a brand, and you have trust from your clients, it's not going to harm you if other people can build the same thing in 5 years. It's just going to encourage you to make sure that you continue to do a high quality job, right? And you've got to continue to innovate and this, that, and the other thing. And so that seems like that would be a really good idea, I think. And so somebody will probably argue with me later, and I look forward to it on that. But so I'm probably gonna get going relatively soon. Off to the next thing. Here we go. Not another podcast this time. Crazy day for me. I don't normally do 2 back to back, but. I think that one of the other things that you'd kind of reference is the war stuff. Is that's one of the other things that's really, I think, it was one of those. So what's interesting is that happened. So I was in Kenya. I'd gone to visit my wife for 2 weeks, and I flew through Qatar.
Okay. How
and
was
Qatar.
That?
I mean, oh my gosh, like the most beautiful airport that you could ever probably imagine. Like
Right.
they basically have a forest in the middle of it. It's kind of crazy how nice it is there. But what was really interesting about it is I flew over, go through Qatar, and I actually didn't get much of a chance to experience the airport on the way over, because my flight was delayed to get there, and so I actually was literally running from my first flight to my next flight. But when I got to shortly after I got to Kenya, that's when all the stuff broke out with Iran, and there was the question about whether or not Trump was gonna make a decision at some point about whether he bombed, and then he bombs Iran, and then Iran retaliates by firing missiles at Qatar is one of the places that they fired them, and Kuwait is another. And I'm just like, Qatar airspace is closed down, and I'm like, well, maybe World War III is going to break out, and I'm going to have to find a different way to fly home, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back through Qatar. So that was really interesting. But there was also like the disappointment, and there are some people, again, your super Trumpers are just like, well, you should have known that he had the right plan, and we don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons and stuff like that. And do I want Iran to have nuclear weapons? No. And World War III didn't break out, thank the Lord. But I was, yeah. Anyway, that was not what I had expected to happen given the promises.
Yeah, it was really, I don't know about you, but I was pissing my pants that day. I was in complete shock, and I kind of went scorched earth on Trump that day. I was calling for impeachment immediately, because that was it was insane to me, dude. Like he promised no new wars. He did, for the most part, did no new wars. Trump won. He was very adamant on the campaign trail against funding Ukraine, and we're going to get this done. And he was very adamant about we're not going to war, right? And he was actually pretty good at resisting Netanyahu up until that point. But it turns out that was all just a farce, setting up a meeting with the Iranians, for the Monday, and then attacking them on Sunday, I believe it was, or it was such a gut punch to me, and I'm sure to a lot of. I wouldn't call myself a Trump supporter, but I did vote for the guy. Where is Qatar? Oh, there it is. It's so tiny. I was just
It isn't very big.
Why'd you go to Qatar if you were going to Kenya? Did you go east or did you go west?
Well, to get to Qatar, it's east, and then Kenya. East.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's west. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's interesting. I don't understand exactly why, but it was a cheap flight.
Right.
Not a cheap flight. Let's be very clear. It wasn't cheap, but it was the cheapest flight I think that I could find to get to Kenya this time. Usually, I've gone through Heathrow in London. One time on the way over, I went through Paris, and then one time I went through Frankfurt in Germany. But so this is the first time that I went through Qatar. I'd never done it before, but I thought it was kind of fun because Qatar Airways has this reputation as being one of the best, poshest. And I would say that when you're flying economy, it's not. Sorry, Qatar Airways, but it's not really that much different. I would say that one of the differences is that the internet, getting access to internet on your phone, on your devices or whatever, was more affordable. Actually, and I think it's powered by Elon Musk's Starlink. And so it was much more affordable to be able to get internet. $10 for a flight, rather than some of those things are like, you can either pay $5 and have access for 30 minutes, or you can pay $25 and have access for the whole flight. And I'm like, yeah, I'll pass. But this was, more affordable, especially when I had a 13-hour flight or something like that on the way back. 14-hour flight, I think, from Qatar to Boston. But yeah, so having access to the internet to be able to communicate with my wife and stuff like that was nice. But yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting experience going through that and being in another country while it was happening. And there are some people that are like the Trump, again, the people who absolutely wake up and love Trump and just love him all day long, no matter what he does, and always have a reason for what he's doing makes sense. And usually it's 5D chess. You don't understand, we'll know someday.
Yeah, trust the plan.
Just a plan. Yeah. Sorry, that is not me. I am the skeptic. I'm not completely giving up, and I think that some of these things, I think it's still within the realm of possibility that Epstein comes out. I think if I were somebody who was creating a plan and I was like, I need to orchestrate things in a way that's going to help us win an election, I would probably plan on making sure that we hold on to them Epstein files until maybe July of 2026, maybe August would be a great time to kind of release that.
No, I don't disagree with you. I mean, but I also think that we're not getting the full files. We're not getting the whole story. There's still going to be redactions, and there's still going to be top tier people that are not told to us. I guarantee you that it's going to be enough to make it appear like it's going to be enough to fool most people that this is it. There's going to be enough holy shit, right? There's going to be enough perp walks, or there's going to be enough high, very notable people that are named that it's going to seem like it's it. But I don't buy that for a second.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I'm hoping that some of these things that look bad now are able to look better in the future. I know that we ran a surplus, and they cited tariffs in June. We actually ran a surplus.
Oh, is that we got $600 checks coming to everyone? Is that what that I've seen?
No, that is connected to tariffs, but I don't think it's specifically connected to the surplus. Maybe I'm wrong, but for the month of June, still I'm like, pay down the national deficit.
I've seen a lot of people, because I've seen a little bit of murmuring about that in the past couple of days on Twitter, but thankfully a lot of people are like, no, just keep it and pay down the damn debt, and let's get to a place where we're not utilizing the central banking system anymore, please.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely need to stop printing money and playing those silly games
and borrowing at interest.
Right.
That's the kicker.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the reason that Trump is trying to put pressure on Powell to lower the interest rates. Because if Powell lowers the interest rates, then national interest rates also end up getting lower. Right. There's a parallel. The federal government has to pay enough to incentivize people to buy their stuff when they can buy other stuff. It doesn't have to be as much as you can get from mortgage-backed securities. So typically, what the Treasury is paying is lower than mortgage rates, but it's not substantially lower than mortgage rates. So without getting mortgage rates and borrowing rates down for everybody else, you can't get them down for the government. And I wonder if that's part of the reason he's putting that pressure on Powell, is really more about the national deficit. Regardless, I think we talked about this before the podcast starts. Like, I was in banking, and I think one of the problems that we have in our society, similar to our federal government, is that we spend. We don't save enough, and we don't spend because we have a system. The lower the interest rates, the higher the incentive for borrowing. And when you borrow, the Bible says the borrower is slave to the lender. And I think regardless of whether you agree with the Bible on everything, you agree with that, right? Like, the reality is, like, when you owe debt to somebody, you are beholden to them, and that's not ultimately good. I don't think that means you shouldn't ever have any debt for any reason, but I think that we have too much reason, and we're too incentivized to borrow. And then on the flip side, we're not incentivized enough to save. Right, most people can't handle the swings of the stock market.
Yeah, what? I mean, the mere act of the whole way that the financial system is set up is going to always disincentivize people to save, because the mere fact that we are printing money, the Fed is printing money, lending it to the United States government with interest, means you'll never pay that back, which means you're continually devaluing the dollar. The dollar today is worth 25% less than it was 4 years ago. And it's worth 97% less it was in 1913 when the 16th Amendment was passed. and the Federal Reserve came into play.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's a problem, and so. Yeah. So like, I know that there's a lot of people out there, mortgage brokers and people like that, who are like, no, we need rates to come down in order for us to be able to sell houses and stuff. But it's like, I think I'm in favor of us keeping rates higher for longer. In fact, I don't think we should ever take them down from their current rates. And again, you're saying we shouldn't even have the Federal Reserve. I don't know. Like,
the source. Yeah.
I wish that we could. I wish that I could be in a place where I could imagine a world in which we could reverse course on that. But again, that's another one that's like, can we put that genie back in the bottle? And like, I think that there's so much of our financial system that is tied to it that it would basically create an economic crisis, the likes of which we couldn't even imagine. But there is a way to pare it back, and if we could start doing that, I think that would be good. And maybe
it's not just us, though. I mean, City of London got to do it too. You know,
that's true. Yeah, it's one of the challenges. Yeah. So, well, thank you once again, Dane, for coming on. I know that we talked about the idea of potentially doing like a kind of a debate scenario, but I was kind of trying to nail down who I would have come in, because I want to have a Democrat. I'd love to have some different perspectives in the room. Who knows? Maybe Rafael Macias would be happy to come on and talk about some things, and we could talk, because we didn't talk this time. I'm sure you have a lot of things to say about what happened in the legislature this year here in the state of Maine, and and that would be fun to talk about, and maybe we could get Rafael to come on and kind of represent the Democrat perspective. And I have another guy who's open. He's more middle of the road, and then I could be the Republican, and then we could have 4 different voices on a number of different topics. And you could probably give me the list of, hey, we should talk about these things, and I'll have my own list. And I think I'd like to get something like that going. Well, thanks again for coming on and for being politically active and engaged. Not enough people are, even if we're not completely on the same side of the aisle. As we said before, we've got more in common than we do, and with all the the negativity. And I maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think there's a lot of things that aren't happening exactly the way that we wanted. But I would suspect that you still would prefer this guy over the other person.
Oh, 1,000%. Yes. Yeah. No question.
That's sometimes that's one of the things that I've been like, okay. Even when I'm frustrated, I'm like, yeah, but compared to the alternative, it's not even a choice. It's still not even a choice, But anyway, well, cool. Well, thanks again, and thank you all for watching. We'll be back again on Friday. Friday will be kind of interesting if all goes according to plan. I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, no, that's not this. That's not this week. We have something. We're going to talk about election integrity and what things that we can do aside from voter ID. Although I encourage everybody to show up in November for voter ID and also for protecting Second Amendment rights. What?
Sign the pledge your vote.
All right.
If you go to voter ID for me, they got a link right there. Sign up and pledge your vote.
Voter ID for me, and then also you got to vote no on the red flag laws and yes on voter ID in November. Please show up. All right. Thanks, Dane. Have a good one, everybody.